going to do this thing. We're going to have some helpers with offering. And I'm going to ask us to please silence our cell phones.
Thank you for reminding us.
All right, page 214. Nicely done. Please rise for the half patch. The ark is open. Sarah. If you want to take the black book, it is on page 928. Look there.
All right.
because Tom was like other, the Tanya Shabbat of Niket, Bayan and Ro, and Napiti at the prime, at Abraham, but instead of a very more, low Arnish Mahini. So then, the Tati the Cow and Rasher both the Tan, Yella, and then, Minas to the platform, etc. Bisha Rabbit, Amen. You short speed then.
Israel.
That may talk to or Ishma Abraham, from the shore, Abraham, the front, and the cat, the very cat, Abraham, check a pet over there, la so there. Baruch Asaranam, Kolamas, and Asamantra, the Metaphel, the Baruch Asaranai, Yotain, Torah. Alright, we need our lifter and our
Yandu. Torah, Asher, Moshe, B'nai Yisrael, Adonai, V'ad Moshe, V'etofecha Meushar, Yitzchak Zikiva, V'etofecha Meushar, Zivot Hashem, Zivot
Yes. Anyone observing the yard side would like a memorial prayer said? I'm sure
Yalu Chimena, Kis Koshmorada, Eretz Shabbat, Yidmayara Karen, Tilale Fasidov in Israel through Hallelujah. The David is more, my heart's David, Yoshua, Yami, Saddam, Sushiari Moshe, Inasu, Viteola, Vegavo Melech HaKavod, Isa Melech HaKavod, Adonai Gisu Vikimor, Adonai Gimor, Milchama, Sushiari Moshe, Usiu, Viteola, Vegavo Melech HaKavod, Isa Melech HaKavod, Adonai Tzvot,
Is on page 222. Pages 223 through 229. Be seated. Please rise for the full Kaddish. Elenu, page 231. So normally, if we had a bar bat mitzvah, now it would be speeches and whatnot. But since we don't, there is shalashudas, and in about half an hour, we're going to have maris and Havdalah. So if you have a bar mitzvah coming up that is on a Saturday afternoon, you definitely want to do your best to stick around, and we can have you at the factory by 7 still. Just saying. So as a topic, maybe put you off is eating bugs.
Is that why that bug was flying around?
That's why that was a prop.
That's a great deal.
That's what you say.
Yeah.
Wait till you hear this.
You're at least, man.
I've lost 7 hours too.
I can do
I'm waiting for him watching. I'm waiting for both.
Yeah,
Deja stew. Hello.
What listen from is in Seattle. So
But you're not. It's just fun talking to you.
Oh. See you next week. Leslie, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Mel,
See you around the hall.
see you.
I got some.
See you next week.
Shoes, Baruch Adonai, Elohim Melech Haminara.
Slice of rice.
I'll bring that down.
Rabbi?
Just take care. They just do.
What grade is Esther?
He's a junior.
Starting with the schools?
He is.
Yeah. Do you have any references?
Stay tuned.
No, it's a decision.
I'll send these around this way. Maybe over optimistic, you think 15, but you never know.
One more down this way.
This one.
Send this way. No, everyone's reading ahead, actually, it up. So, Leslie, are you allowed to eat bugs?
No.
Summer questions.
So Mel, our secretly Sparty, tell us more.
Have to have fidget straight.
Good answer.
All right, so one of my favorite hobbies is being on the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards, and so sort of whatever questions are coming up, and so some are, like same-sex marriage, or like the Mahot and Yamid. Some of them are like ones that are sort of pressing in the world. This one is the question of may Jews eat bugs? And the question that this tshuva immediately asks is, why do you want to know? Right? Like, who's asking? Similar to, there's a story about a rabbi where a congregant came and said, Rabbi, my chicken fell in the toilet, is it still kosher? And the rabbi said, why do you want to know? But it turns out that there are cultures in which eating insects, they are considered to be delicious. And the thing that has changed is that as people are sensitive to the environment and things like that, so it takes an astonishing amount of water, fertilizers, and energy to grow the grain that a cow needs to eat for you to make beef. Pork is not really our problem, but pork causes tremendous environmental pollution, and even chickens and, God help us, turkeys, right? Even birds, fowl, if you will, take up a lot of energy and resources. So you can make dozens of pounds of grain-based food or plant-based food for the same amount of energy it takes to make 1 pound of steak. So
I think the numbers are, it's 19 times the amount of grain to get 1 pound of feed.
I've heard different estimates, but
It's
a lot.
Yeah, really a lot.
And so there was a report here that 80% of the world's farmland is used to raise and feed livestock, even though animals only account for 18% of the global calorie consumption. So basically, it's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of the energy is used to make 20% of the food. And in a world in which resources may become increasingly scarce, meat may be out of reach for a lot of people, or my having a hamburger may actually mean that someone somewhere else in the world, the corn that was used to feed that cow, is corn that somebody else in the world is not going to be able to eat. So at the moment, in general, most starvation in the world. Well, wait till the end.
Dessert.
Right, most of the grain in the world, most of the starvation in the world is not because there is enough food in the world, it's just not distributed well. But will that actually stick? Now, the other thing is that it has come around now that there are many people who are working on insect protein as a form of animal-based protein that is relatively inexpensive. It doesn't take nearly as much to grow insects, and they don't need food of the same quality that you give to cows. But there is, I don't really know, how many drumsticks you get off an ant. A centipede would be great if everyone, right? How many drumsticks you get off a centipede. And what I want to show you in the next 15-20 minutes is that this is actually a live issue in a surprising way, and actually, oddly enough, relates to Thanksgiving, which is not that far off. You're like, how? Well, that's because you didn't read ahead far enough. So the Torah, one thing that most of us know, or if not, is that in general, bugs are not kosher, in case anyone was wondering. So in fact, there is a tradition that when you are having vegetables or fruit, that you are supposed to double check that there aren't bugs inside. And so people have different levels of neurosis about that, ranging from, if you see a worm in an apple, eat around it, to actually holding up your lettuce in front of a light box like it's an X-ray to see if there's any bugs. Now, what I will tell you is, the more you look for bugs, the more you find. In particularly organic produce, and it varies by the batch, but there are definitely times when you'll get some lettuce and you rinse it and there's a little black dot, a lot of little black dots. You rinse it again, there's still black dots. You rinse it a third time, there's still black dots. Congratulations, you now have a bug farm. So, at some point, it is insane, right? So there's some people who say you shouldn't eat asparagus or Brussels sprouts or artichoke hearts because there's no way to eat them without bugs. Or my favorite is, apparently a lot of species of figs are pollinated by wasps, but the wasp does not actually make it. And so, in fact, inside every fig of certain species, there is the remains of a wasp somewhere. So that did not bother the people who ate figs in ancient times. Today, people get stressed out about it. I got other things I got to worry about right now. But if you look at page 2, you'll actually see in the Torah that there is actually anticipated this question that we are going to ask here. So would someone like to read line 20? This is Leviticus 11:20. Renee. You just took a bite. Go ahead.
All wing swarming things that walk on fours shall be an abomination for you. You want me to keep going?
So look, basically don't eat bugs. Keep going.
But these you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walk on fours, all that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with on the ground. So the grasshoppers?
Keep going.
Of these you may eat the following: arbe, of every variety, all varieties of the salam,
Mm-hmm.
the harbol,
Nice.
of every variety, and all varieties of hagab. But all other winged swarming things that have 4 legs shall be an abomination.
So the Torah seems to think that some particular variety of insect that walks on 4s, that have jointed legs to leap with, these are permitted, and then it gives us some specific names. Arbeh, we know of as locusts, right? So when we set the 10 plagues, Barad, Arbeh is the locusts, and these others are related species of critters. So why do you think the Torah would, why would God say that most bugs are forbidden, but these particular species are allowed, right? What would make it, like why would the Torah carve out an exemption, right? Like, if you think about animals that are kosher, so animals that have split hooves and chew their cud all eat a certain kind of diet, right? Like pigs, like they, diseases, things like that. These are healthier, or like they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, right? Like we don't want to get into that, right? Like, hey. All right. I think the top is. I think it's in the school. If you want to join us, you can.
I do.
All right. Well, welcome. Come on in. All right. Right. Yeah. We got plenty more where that came from. Perhaps even too many. So we're talking about eating bugs. Anyway, so all right. And fish, fins, and scales. Right. The kinds of sea creatures that don't have fins and scales, I'm told, are delicious. Right. But are more likely to be contaminated, have diseases. I mean, look, you can get sick from salmon also, it's just a little bit harder, right? There's no such thing as sushi-grade shrimp. But why would it be that these particular kinds of insects would be okay? What would the theory be? What's different about these? Like, are they less gross? I don't know, like.
They don't really eat humans, but they eat grain.
Because they eat grains. They don't eat, right? If like flies eat everything, right? Also, it takes like a lot to make like one meal out of, right? Right. So like, you can actually see one and eat one, right? Like a mosquito, like there's nothing to it, right? Like on the other hand, like this is actually, you can see it, like it's a critter that you could actually catch and eat. Anyone else? Any ideas? It eats grain, right? It eats grain. That may actually be another point, which is that in general, these are, they tend to form swarms. And, like if you've ever seen kiddush at a bar mitzvah, you know what I'm talking about, right? They sort of swarm in and there's nothing left. And so the fact is, like, if you had locusts come through, like, you might starve if you can't eat these. So that may be. All right. Samuel, do you want to stay in here? Do you want to study with us? No? No? You like some challah? No. Do you want to eat bugs? Okay.
Locusts also eat the green of the plant. They eat the entire plant, not just the green.
Right. Not like kiddush where they always leave the salad. Right? Okay. So the rabbis don't really get into that question of why these kinds of bugs.
I thought we weren't supposed to ask. I thought I was taught I wasn't supposed to ask.
So here's the thing. For every rabbi, so there is a category of laws called hukim, where you're not supposed to ask. But for every chok, and yet there are rabbis who actually make their living, a significant number of them, asking why. So for example, kosher in particular, there are whole books, whole treatises written in the Middle Ages. Like, so for example, some say that like the theory of why you can't have milk and meat together, I once came up with 11 different theological explications, right? The Torah doesn't tell us. So, I mean, there are rabbis who say you're not supposed to ask, but they're usually the rabbis who know the least, right? They just don't want trouble. Like, in general, like, the greatest rabbis usually, like, they were not willing to claim that their answer was the right one, right? But even if they said you're not supposed to ask, but here's some ideas, right? Like that sort of, I mean, there's a very limited number of things where it wasn't you're not supposed to ask, it's that it's fundamentally unknowable. So for example, the law of the red heifer is specifically given an example of a thing that you can't know because of the way it's explained in the Bible. But the Bible never says don't ask why it's kosher, it just, that's how it plays out. So the Mishnah, which is a code of Jewish law, which is like 1,800 years old, as opposed to the Torah that goes back, let's say, about 3,000, goes through in more detail. Because the Torah says these kinds of insects, but we can't leave well enough alone. And so the Mishnah actually gives us a description at the bottom. With regard to chagavim, anything that has 4 legs and 4 wings and jumping legs, and whose wings cover most of its body, Rabbi Yossi says, and its name is chagav. Rabbi Yossi says not only does it have to have these signs, it has to actually be called chagav.
Translation for that?
What?
Do we have a translation? What does chagav mean?
Chagav means chagav. Like, what does the word elephant mean?
Okay.
It means a particular kind of thing, right? And if you see that, let me show you a picture, right?
It is what it is.
A chagav is this kind of critter. So now the problem is, over thousands of years, right, like, do we know what actual kinds of critters a particular Hebrew name refers to? So there are some where, so for example, when the Torah tells us a para, a cow, like, you have to be about 2 years, once you're about 2 years old, you know what a cow is, right? When the Torah says a kelev, a dog, now, in fact, dogs have changed a lot since back then. Like, we have bred them, like, chihuahuas did not exist in nature ever, right? But dogs have changed in their style and form. We still know what a book is, right? On the other hand, there's a list of non-kosher birds in the Bible, and it says the Hasidah, well, we have to do some math to say that so, like, we know that it's some species of owl, but there's a lot of kinds of owls out there. How do we know we have the right one, right? Because these are not common animals. And in general, you have a swarm of locusts. The cops don't come later. Well, can you identify the locust? Right? The sketch artist is like, is this the locust that attacked you, ma'am? No. So, there are a bunch of bugs that have 4 small legs and then 2 big jumpy legs, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that are kind of like that. But the Torah has a very clear, and sort of assumes that you know what a chagav is and what a chargol is. So, for example, in the book of Numbers, when the Israelites are trying to conquer the land of Israel, and they say, "V'nehi be'ein chagavim," we saw these giant, tall people amongst the Canaanites, and we felt like we were chagavim, like we were insects before them, like we were locusts in front of them. Which we could get into that more depth, but clearly everyone knew what a chagav was back then. And the rabbis actually go on, but by the time of the Mishnah, the rabbis are a little bit less clear perhaps, or they have to at least show their work. Why is this name applicable to this kind of bug? Also, they go out of the way to point out on page 3, all meat is prohibited to cook in milk, except for the meat of fish and chagav. And meat is prohibited to place it together with cheese on a table, except for the meat of fish and chagav. And if you take a vow to refrain from eating meat, you can still eat fish and chagav. So by the time of the Mishnah, all of these kinds of critters were subsumed under a general, but they were just all called chagav, right? So even though there are dozens of sub-varieties of cow, there's like Guernsey and Angus and so on, like unless you are, Wagyu, I don't know, like in general, like we just say cow, right? When in fact, there's a lot of different species. There's a lot of different ways that can look. And the scientists would say things are two things are considered the same species if they can breed, crossbreed, but that's actually not always true in nature. So for example, you can get a horse and a donkey together, play the right music, and turn the lights down real low, and you end up with a mule. Similarly, you can make a liger and a tigon, right? Lion and tiger crossbreeds. So, so it's not so clear, right, that that's really true. But the question is, like, are these the same kind of critter or not? So pages 3 through 9 or so, there's a whole debate that this rabbi goes through about what kind of critter the Talmud thinks is a kosher bug. And in fact, what about crickets, says Pinocchio, right? So there's all these other kinds of discussions, because also it says after its kind. So like after its kind might mean to include, and its relatives, right? So not only, right, so when it talks about non-kosher birds, it says the buzzard and its relatives. So not just a buzzard, but anything that's kind of like a buzzard. Go ahead to page 6. Maimonides actually lists 8 different species of locusts. So Maimonides is always very practical, and he sort of summarizes the Talmudic discussion and says these are the 8 species that are permitted, and presumably Maimonides, because he was so smart, knew what they were. But the Rosh, who is an Ashkenazi sage, so Maimonides is Sephardic, he's in Egypt. The Rosh on page 7 says no, and he's going back to details of the Talmudic conversation, that even though there are signs of what makes a kosher bug, it has to be a kind that we call chagav today. So you might have called it a fargol, a sulam, or something else, but it doesn't matter. Now, in Europe, they did not eat bugs. There just weren't that many locusts to eat. In Morocco, they had a tradition of with kosher, and they would eat them. So in fact, you see on page 9, actually I'm going to take you to the bottom of page 8 first, the importance of tradition. The Rosh, who is an Ashkenazi rabbi, says, I would not eat birds according to their tradition, for I strengthen the tradition I received from our ancestors. So the question is, right, the Torah says these are the kinds of birds that are not kosher. So if I discover a bird that no one has ever seen before, is that bird kosher or not? Maybe it is a relative of the buzzard, right? It's like maybe it's a cousin of the buzzard, a buzzard, or a cousin, right? So the idea is, says the Rosh in particular, I cannot consider an animal of any kind to be kosher unless there is a tradition that it is kosher, unless since the days of the rabbis, people have known this animal and known that it is kosher. So if you show me an animal that no one's ever seen before, an okapi, a capybara, right, I have to assume it's not kosher, even if it chews its cud and has split hooves, because people never ate it before. And particularly it's an issue with birds, because with birds, there are no signs in the Bible. With birds, it just says, these are the 20-something kinds that are not kosher, and that's it.
Wasn't that part of the problem with chicken?
Stay tuned. Well, so chickens, that got solved pretty early. So the issue is the rabbis in the Talmud assume that chicken is kosher, but the Torah doesn't really know about chickens, right? So, but that question got solved early, but you are a little bit ahead of me, right? All Jews in the world everywhere today assume that chicken is kosher. Because in the days of the Talmud, it was assumed by the days of the by the time there were rabbis, everyone assumed that chicken was kosher, even though they didn't eat them. Jews did not eat chickens in the days of the Bible. Right? Chicken soup had not been invented yet. So in Morocco, Jews actually had a tradition that particular kinds of locusts were kosher. But Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, this is the bottom of page 9, said, yes, but I don't trust them. And in fact, any God-fearing Jew, page 10, will abstain from eating these things and will protest when he sees there's other Jews eating them. And so basically in his city, Jews said these kinds of grasshoppers are kosher and we eat them. And he's like, but how do you know, right? Where's the tradition? And they don't look like what other rabbis said the kosher grasshoppers look like. And so he forbids eating them. And that spreads further. So even Spartan who used to eat locusts, for the most part, stopped eating them because of Ibn Attar. However, the Yemenite Jews were isolated from the rest of Judaism for a long time, and they have a lot of traditions that actually match up with how with very ancient practice. So for example, their pronunciation of Hebrew sounds weird to our ears, but is probably closest to what the pronunciation of Hebrew was, 1,500, 1,000 years ago. There are a lot of things that they do that are very similar to what's in the Talmud, whereas we have continued to drift because we've lived amongst other people and we've picked up their customs. And so in Yemen, they eat a species on page 10 that is accepted according to tradition, but its name is not Hagav. And so there's debating, is it Hagav or not? And many modern rabbis say, just don't eat locusts, but there are a few, mostly Yemenite, who do. On the other hand, Ovadia Yosef, this is telling, so he was the most important Spartic sage of the last generation. He says, locusts are to be considered not kosher, but if someone cooks locusts in your pot, they are not treita, which is to say that we treat them as if they're not kosher, but they're not really not kosher. It's the same thing as rice and beans on Passover. If you are an Ashkenazi Jew and you follow the tradition of not eating them, then don't eat them. Or do, I don't care. I say it's okay. But if someone, even if you don't eat rice and beans on Passover, if someone cooks rice or beans in your pots, it does not make them chametz. Because no matter how hard they try, rice and beans cannot become chametz. And so, there you go. And this is really the takeaway. This is the last 2 minutes. Where this tshuva goes is it talks about kosher and non-kosher birds. There's a lot more discussion than locusts because birds were discovered. Birds came from the New World, and in particular there's a debate about turkey. Because turkeys were not known in Europe. Turkeys were a New World bird, and they were brought back to Europe when the pilgrim, in days of Columbus onward, in the late 1400s, early 1500s. And when the pilgrims came back to North America, they brought turkeys back with them. But it's interesting because different people call the bird turkey based on where they thought it came from. So we call turkeys because we thought they came from Turkey. Why? Because merchants from Turkey were who brought them to the parts of Europe where we come from. In other countries, like in Hebrew, they are called Tarnagol Hodu, which basically means an Indian chicken, but not Indian in the sense of Squanto, but Indian in the sense of curry, right? So that is because they thought that turkeys came from India, which is not true, but the people who brought them to that part of the world thought that that's where they came. They thought that that's where they came from because that's the merchants who brought them there. That's what they got. So in particular, this debate, so there were some sages who said, a turkey has the signs of kosher birds, so we should consider it kosher. Or it doesn't have the signs of non-kosher birds. There's a list of what things make a bird non-kosher. It has to have a peelable gizzard, it has to have a particular kind of foot, and it has to have, it should not be a hunting bird. And so there was a view amongst many rabbis that the turkey is kosher because it doesn't have any of the signs of a predatory bird, right? There is such a thing as a turkey buzzard, but it is a buzzard, not a turkey, right? That no one would confuse turkeys with birds of prey, right? However, there were a number of sages who said that turkey was not kosher. So there's actually a tradition, so I am a descendant of Rabbi Yom Tov ben Heller. There is a tradition in some branches of the family that he said that turkey was not kosher. Now, he did not write this down anywhere, right? We have gone through all of his writings, and he doesn't say it anywhere in his written text, but there is this tradition. I happen to come from a branch of the family that says that tradition is made up. But this paper actually cites a distant cousin of mine who cites the tradition. So they have a tofurkey every year, not because they're vegetarians, but because they believe that turkey is not kosher. So the takeaway on 24 is insects are small, and there is a concern that you might misidentify them, that any mass production of insects will require special supervision and precaution to make sure that only kosher species are present. It seems unlikely that we people from Ashgiach to check each and every insect in the process of production. So you would have to raise these insects in isolation, or you could go out and hunt locusts, right? But there's actually a company in Israel that is raising locusts, and they found rabbis who say, yeah, these are the Yemenite kosher bugs, and has actually rendered is actually raising these locusts for the purpose of making not locust fritters, but making locust protein that can be used as an inexpensive protein. And they found some rabbi to give it supervision. So the conclusion of this paper is, if some Yemenite rabbi signs off on it and you are brave enough, you are allowed to eat it, even though a lot of folks along the way said no. So,
Are you dissenting?
I don't know. I've actually been assigned the task of, the paper's not going to be voted on this time. I think I might actually vote for this one. Because, I look, if the Torah says it's kosher, it says it's kosher for a reason. And so, if there are people who have had this tradition continuously since the temple was destroyed, and they know that this is a kosher locust, why not, right? Just because the rabbis in Europe didn't know what a kosher locust looks like, I'm not smarter than them, but I have access to, sources of information that they didn't. And so it's not that I'm overruling them that, the law is wrong. I'm saying, you didn't know, you just didn't know what kind of bug this was. I have people who can tell you that they do. All right, so we are going to quickly do the grace after meals, and then
They even say kosher insects are fine.
that is true. Just they're like fish.
Yeah.
Now notice it does not say that chicken is part of, alas. All right, so we're going to do a very quick grace after meals, and then we will do Mariu and Havdalah. So, here we go.
I meant turkey, the new world word, but I said chicken.
It's all right.
All right.
Page 42. Shir Amala Peshuvadana Yeshivaziyani Nukepoli Azimala Expokvinu Olshone Nubrina Azyom Ruba Gogi Hitiladana La Satimela Hitiladana La Satimanu Vainu Sameti Shuvadana Yeshivitenu Kafi Imbaneke Azorim Betima Terina Yitzoro Alam Yela Mubako No Se Meshe Hazara Morabo Yabo Berina No Se Alumata. Page 44, Kavarai Varek. Yishonam Rakat Havalam Birshut Kavarai Varek. Shefan Mishalom. Baruch Shalom, Baruch 45. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hazan Torah Kulo B'Tuva, B'Efem B'Chesed U'Rachamim, Uno Tenach Amachol Basar Ki Le'olam Chasdot, Otuva Hagadol, Sani Lo Chasar Lanu Ve'Hayasar Lanu Mazon Le'olam Va'et Ha'avor Shemo Hagadol, Ki Wazan U'Farnes L'Hakol, U'Metiv L'Hakol, U'Metiv Mazon Le'Kol Briyotav Asher Bara, Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan Et Hakol. Page 46. Continue at your own pace. Just going to grab one more. Page 260, that book used to be like just I don't know if you got it.
When's your bat mitzvah?
December 23rd.
23rd?
No.
No. That's not the right.
Unready, as she says.
You have a.
Well, we've got
But we're practicing a lot. She's gonna be great.
all right. Start, and we'll do Barkley later because I know we're going to maybe see. Page 264 at the bottom. Israel, page 265 of the Shema. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Adonai Echad, V'chol Elohecha, V'chol Nafshecha, V'chol Me'odecha. Asher Anochi Mesavecha, Elom Alav Elohecha, V'dibarta Bam, V'shitecha V'teishecha, V'kolecha Shakam Lod Al Yadecha, V'yototecha V'neinecha, V'kavcha Mamzidot V'techa V'yisharecha. 266. Adonai Lothem Emet. Umalchuta Moshe Mitzvah Anishra B'Sacharav Yemim Kulam Mi Amocha Ba'elim Adonai Mi Amocha Netar HaKodesh Nara Tziva Tosek Eleh Malchuta Kavaneko Moshe Zedien V'Yamru Adonai Yimlach Olam Ha'ed V'nemar Yirkol T'Kulas V'Nirut Megal Yisrael. Page 267 at the bottom. Ushmate and to the half cottage, page 269. Amen. Pages 270 through 278. If you are still in your private prayer, we'll give another minute. Page 279. The half copy. Keep it up, good Ashman, Rabba. Yamati, Rocker, Kim, Seba, Paipano, Shabbat, Amen. Keep her up, the last week, Amen. You can add with the Torah, but the Orphans Marriage Wati, Orphans Marriage Shuati. Book Cottage, page 280, and we need our Hellenic helpers to start making our way up. Amen. Think about Amen. Amen. Oh, special says Shalom. Amen. Page 280. Alenu. Round 2. 1, 2, 3. Alenu Vishadea Padon Take to Adiam Celebrate. Hello, Asan and Joy. Warner's Cottage, page 282. Itadal, Itadam, Shmerava, Viaman, Dira, Hirute, Viamlikon, Kaikon, Yomikon, Kayed, Obed, Israel, Ba'adala, Bisman, Karim, Ruamin, Yehi, Shmerava, Borah, Elam, Neomaya, Ipara, Ishaba, Ipar, Ikramam, Ikase, Itadar, Italeb, Italab, Shmei, Yusham, Riru. Zaila, Mikol, Pirata, Shuraka, Vishwata, Nekamata, Damiram, Diaman, Amin, Yeti, Shalamarabami, Shemaya, Ani, Lako, Israel, Romain, Seshalom, Rama, Puya, Seshalom, Israel. All right, come close for Abdallah, page 283. Shavua Tov. Eliyahu Hanvi. Eliyahu Hatifi. Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agilati. Bimera v'yameinu. Yavo Eleinu. Imashiach ben David. Imashiach ben David. Shavua Tov. All are well done.